So looking at that picture that has now been seen, I think, by literally hundreds of millions of people around the world, I was actually on Sunday night watching the Academy Awards, trying to get my mind off of all the terrible events going on in the world. And then this happens.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow.
Okay, then. So I'm thinking that didn't look like it was planned, but it's Hollywood. They're good at making fake things look real. But then it continues.
Will Smith just smacked out of me.
Yeah.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay.
Okay, so things turned pretty dark pretty quickly. Given the work that I do, it made me feel especially sad, but also really brought home this point, this idea that I feel really, really deeply about, which is that all of us, we all need to find better ways of handling conflict, of handling differences. What I want to do today is really break down what do I think actually was happening here. This was, of course, completely inappropriate behavior on behalf of Will Smith. And of course, even though Chris Rock was trying to be humorous, being humorous at the expense of other people is always a dangerous thing and probably something that we should all avoid. But there's a lot that was going on here. There's a lot that could have been done differently. And I think there's a lot that can still be done. So let's go back and think about this. Chris Rock says something that is upsetting and offensive, an insult to his wife, who's suffering from a disease called alopecia. This is a disease where you actually, among other things, lose all of your hair. And it's a really painful disease to go through. Many years ago, I actually dated someone who suffered from this. And, I've often talked about difficult conversations on this channel. And I can just tell you that when that person shared that news with me, it was an extremely difficult conversation for them to do, fraught with a lot of emotion. I think it's really easy to understand why Will Smith was feeling as powerfully as he did. But it's really interesting because if we take a look at this clip, right, there is this moment where after Chris Rock has said his joke, you see this confusion going on in Will Smith. He's like trying to smile, but you could almost see the anger going on. And in our field, that moment, this is something that we call the emotional refractory period. Our brain really operates at two levels, right? There's this kind of conscious mind, this cognitive mind that's making rational decisions. And then there's this kind of unconscious mind, right? That's processing a whole bunch of things. And in this moment, this unconscious mind is triggered and there's a flood of emotion. But the flood of emotion is more than just feelings. It's actually a release of a whole bunch of chemicals. Things like adrenaline and cortisol. And we've probably all had experiences like this where we feel a knot in our stomach, or maybe our palms go sweaty, or maybe we feel ourselves literally going flush or going pale in some way. This period is called an emotional refractory period. And it's this period where our cognitive side is completely overwhelmed by this subconscious side of ourselves. This is a moment where clearly what Will Smith does is honestly what an extreme version, frankly, of what many of us do in these moments, which is one of two things. We either choose to fight or we choose to flee. We choose to avoid. Now, we all know what Will Smith did, right? He gets up and he chooses to fight. But let's break down a little bit more from Will Smith's perspective, probably what was going on, because it's not just emotions that are happening, and it's not just physical. So it was pretty clear later on when he wins the Academy Award, and he talks about how he feels called to protect his family, to protect his people. That part of his story about himself is that he defends the honor of his family and the honor of people he cares about. And so part of what is happening here in this moment is that Chris Rock is hitting a serious identity trigger for Will Smith. And one of the things we know about conflict is that when someone hits an identity trigger, it usually goes off the rails. And that is exactly what happens here, right? The identity trigger of Will Smith, which is I am someone who protects my family, has been challenged by this joke. And so what Will Smith does is he goes into fight mode and resorts to violence. One of the things that I feel most committed about in the work that I do is that all differences, all conflicts, from the ones, again, on a playground to the ones at the Oscar Awards to the ones in Ukraine and Russia, can be handled without the resort to violence. So if we're unpacking this, what are the kinds of things that we would need to do? Well, the first thing, right, if we were coaching Will Smith, is to say it's really important to be as aware as possible of those emotional refractory periods. And when you are in them, the number one thing to do is to do no harm. That does not mean that you're not going to address the issue later. In fact, it means you should address the issue at some part. But in that moment, do no harm. In this case, literally physical harm. In our day-to-day lives, it might be like, don't reply to all on that email. Don't make the nasty, hurtful comment in response. Because even if it has a nanosecond of good feeling for you, it's going to escalate, and it's going to be embarrassing, and it's not going to advance your long-term interests. Secondly, find some time and space when you can actually raise the issues of concern, because they're serious ones here. We don't know whether Chris Rock knew about Will Smith's wife's condition, but either way, what we know for sure is that the impact of his action was hurtful and deeply upsetting to Will Smith. We don't know the intentions that Chris Rock had. I think we could presume they're unlikely to have been at the level of hurt that they had, but we don't know. So what we would coach Will Smith to do here is to find some opportunity to get a moment with Chris Rock. Now, whether it's that evening or not, I don't know. It might not be the most appropriate evening. You probably don't want to corner Chris Rock, at the Vanity Fair after party when you're both having a martini and corner him. That might not be the moment. But not to let too much time go by, to reach out and to say, I wanted to share with you the impact of that joke and also understand more what was driving you and maybe whether you knew about my wife's condition. So what that would then enable is Chris Rock a chance to maybe apologize, maybe explain himself. Maybe he would defend himself. But what we could imagine there is at least it would open up the door to a more productive conversation where actually both sides could actually learn something. And part of this, right, would be not just sharing the impact, but also what are the set of feelings and emotions that it brought up for Will Smith. So that didn't happen. This ugly scene happened instead. I think many of us feel really sad about it because so many of us, I think, deeply respect Will Smith and also Chris Rock. So there's this question of what can be done now. And I think there's an incredible opportunity, should these two people so choose, to come together in some way and to actually model a learning conversation that might involve some mutual apologies, that might actually express something that each of them learned from this experience. It reminds me of, some of you may remember, some years ago during the administration of President Barack Obama, there was a conflict between Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates and a police officer in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I don't need to go into a lot of the details about that conflict, but to suffice it to say, it made national news. Ultimately, what the parties did is the African-American professor and the white police officer actually went to the White House and had a beer with Barack Obama and Joe Biden. This was actually called the Beer Summit. Some of you who are old enough may remember this. Now, some of you may say, well, that was very token. That was pretty staged. And in some way, it was staged. In another way, though, it was a genuine conversation. You may remember that neither side actually confess that they were all wrong or that they were all right, but both sides felt like they had learned something. And I think that there's a really great opportunity to do that here. So in that moment, when you find yourself emotionally triggered, really angry, and prone to either flee or to fight, first, become aware of your own feelings and emotions. Identify what are the identity triggers being pulled on here. And then think about, when is there a time and a place, or how can I create a time and a place to actually initiate a real conversation about the impact on me, how I interpreted it, to try to understand the impact on the other side, and to see the interaction not in just zero-sum terms, but as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity perhaps for apology and reconciliation. So this is the very first of what I hope to do as an occasional series of videos that will actually respond to real current events in the news. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School and the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. So for now, I hope you'll subscribe, like, and hit the button. Thanks for negotiating with me, and keep on watching.